Shadow donors and voters and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials and the Millennial. Joining me today is Ryan the Squirrel Brady.
Howdy.
He's back. And we're happy he's back. And of course, Christopher Hopkins, our assistant producer, and our producer, Adam Katora. And this podcast is called Shadow Donors and Voters. And first up, why are we calling it that? Because we have a story that came out, and it's a pretty important one. And it says exclusive, data shows that half of the 2019 donations to Act Blue came from untraceable, unemployed donors. So why does that matter? What is Act Blue?
I really have no idea.
Okay, so Act Blue is a conduit for Democrat donors.
So a super PAC in a sense?
Yes. And of course, as you know, when you give money to a federal election campaign, you have to provide your name, your address, and your employer.
Okay.
And so the reason you have to provide your employer is so that you can demonstrate that your employer is not a foreign actor.
And yeah, so that you can trace where the money's coming from. You exchange of goods and service for your compensation.
Absolutely. So Act Blue has collected some $400 million. It's just unprecedented.
That's a lot of money.
For liberal causes. And this article in Fox News, and by the way, it has been ignored in the mainstream media, says that half of those folks who've given the $400 million have said they're unemployed. Now, I don't know about you out there in podcast land, but if you're unemployed, are you giving money to a political candidate? You're unemployed. You have no money.
I was unemployed for 2 months, end of June through all of August and most of September, and I was not spending money on any kind of goodwill causes or political candidates at all. That money was being well accounted for to make sure I can stay on my feet.
You were conserving your cash.
Yeah.
Because you are, by definition, unemployed, which means new cash isn't coming in.
Nope.
Other than potentially unemployment checks, which you need in order to pay for food and clothing and, of course, your car, insurance and your gasoline, as well as what? Your rent.
And yeah, well, depending on the unemployment system of it that's run by the states, you may not even be seeing your paychecks in a timely manner. You applied 3 months ago, and you may just be getting your first paycheck, granted a lump sum, but you need that money two or three months ago.
Exactly. So the article goes on to say less than 2 months ahead of the presidential election, with concerns of foreign interference at the forefront of this election, a conservative political group is raising serious concerns and legitimate concerns about millions of donations reported by a major Democratic fundraising platform called Act Blue. And that's because the donations are coming from individuals who are claiming they don't have an employer because they are currently not working. I'm sorry, this is money that's being laundered, and it's being laundered, I have no doubt, from foreign actors. And what I can't imagine is where the outrage is. Look, we've heard a Democrat Party for 4 years say that we had Russian interference. And there's no doubt in my mind, this has got to be interference from probably China and Russia and George Soros and who knows who, right?
Yeah, so coming from the middle of the road on this, I just find it popping up all the time. I keep saying this phrase, if the shoe was on the other foot, So this Act Blue is getting a bunch of, like, as you were saying, untraceable and everything. If this all becomes really, truly founded and blown wide open more than just Fox News, I just find it hilarious that, they'll take the money if it wins the election, but the Democrats for 4 years are saying the election was stolen, it was rigged, it was meddled, interfered with, and the interference or meddling had such a significant effect that it changed the results of the election, which I highly doubt. Very minuscule, probably, attempts, except for minor social engineering. But other than that,
money can move elections.
Money can move elections. It's a little different from I didn't think money was used in the 2016 election. But if money is involved in this case, which it seems to be the case, that can be buy more ad buys. That can get you more people to do more door knocking and pay for volunteers to go out and do stuff.
It could also be something. It could also be something as simple as foreign actors and folks who are interfering in our elections giving money to these individuals to do two things. First, say, I want you to give money that I'm giving to you to Democrat causes, but also keep a little for yourself and make sure you vote Democrat. In other words, literally buying an election. $200 million is a lot of money.
It reminds me a little bit of like Acorn. But the other shoe, though, the funny thing is the Democrats are so concerned about this election, saying, if President Trump wins, we're not going to take it because it's not right, it was wrong, or somehow he stole it or got rigged. Well, it sounds like this is like the Democrats are like, oh, well, it's our money. People are giving us money. We're not going to really care. We just want to win. And it's like, well, your guys are campaigning that President Trump's going to be doing something bad. You're doing just almost as equally bad if, it's just, yeah.
And first of all, it was investigated ad nauseum, the Trump administration was. And believe me, if they found something, they would have impeached him for that. But in the articles of impeachment, it had nothing about Russian collusion whatsoever because they couldn't find anything.
No, shifty shift.
After spending all that money. But now we have a situation where it's very clear that there are and you know why it's clear to me? Not just because of this article, but because we see these individuals in the street, and everybody I talk to, including Democrats as well, who are reasonable Democrats and independents, are saying some of these people must be being paid to do what they're doing, right? I mean, they're being paid just like they're being paid to make donations and say they're unemployed.
Wait, like during a pandemic where money's tight, that they have time enough to go protest or instigate riots, which we've seen across this country, like Portland, geez, I'm so sorry for that city. It's like, wait, you're like full-time protesters getting money, protesters/rioters getting money, being able to buy meals and food. I don't think anyone's really giving things out. Maybe some services are, but honestly, you have way too much time in your hands I'd be more concerned about where I'm getting my next meal and making sure I keep my roof over my head.
Absolutely. And the thing is what happens if Donald Trump wins re-election despite all of these forces against him, including the media and Hollywood and the rich tech giants, and also these foreign actors who are giving money? What happens if Donald Trump actually wins and has a second term? And there's a report out from the Gateway Pundit that says far-left groups are secretly organizing and preparing for mass violence after Joe Biden loses in November. And it goes on to say a central group of far-left and communist groups gathered on Zoom last week to plot strategy following the November 3rd election. The Fight Back Table, which is what it's called, initiative, met to plot and organize strategy and violent actions following the November elections when Joe Biden loses to President Trump. For weeks, liberal groups have sustained violent riots and protests across the United States. Several Democrat-led cities suffered hundreds of millions of dollars in damage during the left's latest rioting spree. Yet these same groups, of course, are trying to organize and say, hey, let's have an initiative so right after the election, if Donald Trump were to win, we want to literally make things, just wreak havoc like we've never seen before in the United States so that Donald Trump won't stay in the presidency. He'll be forced out.
I think the majority of the country would rally behind a duly elected president, regardless of whoever it is. These extremist groups are going to be strategizing mass violence against their own countrymen because they don't agree for a difference of opinion. I think, honestly, what the hell? I don't get it. I think this is over decades of, not being extreme here, but let's just think about it. The way we see many reports about our education system, how it's being run for decades, we're seeing, a lot of lack of respect of authority. Granted, our system's not perfect, and we've said that before. There's a lot of imperfections in our system that we need to address and fix real problems that affected a lot of people in this country. But to think about mass violence because an election turned out didn't turn out the way you want. If Vice President Joe Biden wins the election, I may not be the biggest fan about it, but if he won and it's been vetted that he won it and duly elected, then that's the case. We were going to see if the Republicans get the House, so we don't really get a lot of rapid change from all his promises that scare me. But I don't know. I can't understand how we have Americans not liking being American, wanting us to be in other countries that have failed in their political systems and bring it here because they think they can do it better, where I think we're already seeing where it fractured at the seam, where they resorting to violence. You're not winning. You should win over the hearts and minds through actual good debate and thought and process and ideas rather than, nope, this is what we're going to do. If you don't like it, we're going to, take you with the violence. I don't get it.
So what's interesting about this is, and you're a big 2A guy, Ryan, is last night I was with a group, it was the Republican men's group, and I was talking to them, speaking to them, and also speaking with them. And one gentleman in the group is young. He's in his mid-20s, and so he's a millennial. Yep. And he decided that college wasn't for him, and he always wanted to start his own company. So he became an FFL.
That's really hard to get. That's a lot of intrusion in your life.
No doubt in my mind. And he says, Mark, you know what you won't believe? He said, do you know who all of my customers are? They're black men and black women in one of America's largest black counties in the United States.
Most populous counties, too.
One of the most populous counties,
too. Right next to D.C.
And it's called Prince George's County. So this young man is in that county. He said, the thing is, these individuals, these are law-abiding citizens. Yeah. They want the same thing everybody else wants, and they see the same things everybody else sees, and they're concerned about it.
Yeah.
And so they want to protect themselves because they're equally worried about, well, what happens after November if Trump wins? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of these individuals, I can't say for sure because I can't really draw that direct line connection. I think many of these same individuals who are black, who are wanting to get guns, and to get them obviously legally through him.
Good on them.
Are maybe Trump voters. Potentially. Because why would you get a gun if you weren't concerned about the same thing that everybody is concerned about?
And it's pretty funny, though, even before this. So we had the pandemic gun buy scare. So you had a bunch of first-time gun buyers, and most of them were liberal because usually most conservatives already have their guns and all their ammo. So you have all this shortage of supply because of the supply chain's been affected because of the pandemic. And then you also, on top of that, you have the riots and the protests and all that stuff. You have so many first-time gun buyers, and most of the reports saying they're liberal, people never even thought about owning a gun, and then they go to the gun store and they get angry that they can't just walk out with a handgun the same day. Granted, maybe a rifle or shotgun, depending on your state, but Maryland, California, New York, you need to get a handgun permit, you have a 10-day waiting period, you have to pay money for the application to the state to get it processed and get another background check, which is pretty much the same background check that you get through the NICS system, which is the FBI run one, where they call, say, oh yeah, he checks out, all right, good. But it's funny, they're trying to bypass the system that they created and voted actually with their legislators. Good on them for exercising their right buying guns. That's fine as long as you're trained, you're familiar with your weapon, you know firearm safety because
he does the training obviously as well.
Everyone does it. Yeah. And so it's good to see that, and I think that's part of the walkaway movement. If everyone looks up hashtag walkaway or the walkaway movement, you have a lot of liberals now coming over to the conservative side, maybe being more moderate rather than full hardcore conservatives, which is totally fine. I think the ability to be, as I said in prior podcasts, you can be on the Republican Party and not be fully conservative. You can have liberal ideas or left-leaning thoughts and I'm environmental conservative, but I'm totally for free market. It's simple as that.
It's interesting, too. He brought up something else, Ryan, as well, this young man. He said that the cost of ammo is going through the roof. Mm-hmm. And he said there's no explanation of why that is. And I said, well, maybe it's supply and demand.
Material.
But for some reason, that isn't cutting it because why would the supply, it's not like, rocket science, you just make a lot more of it. So his concern is someone slowing down the manufacturing intentionally in the federal government or elsewhere?
Interesting.
Is there also potentially concerns, potentially of the federal government that maybe the wrong people are ordering this ammo and they're trying to track who's ordering it?
Yeah.
And so, look.
You can buy ammo online and get delivered to your house.
Exactly.
And granted,
have you bought it recently? And I was just wondering if you've had the same experience.
All the ammo I bought in store in person. I have to look up Maryland law. I think I'm allowed to do it in Maryland. I just didn't want to go through the process, and it's like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I got my good amount. I'm not really that concerned. I haven't really stockpiled, because it costs money. But you're not fear, but you brought up a good point on that point about ammo shortage and stuff like that. It's not unheard of. There's been legislatures. There was one guy in Maryland when Maryland passed that 2013 Firearm Safety Act, which okay, whatever. proposing a 50% tax on ammo purchase. So you're prohibiting people you're hurting lower income Americans from buying, ammo for their legally bought firearms, but
to protect themselves.
Yeah, to protect themselves. But then the rich, it's like, 50% tax. All right, I paid $10 on a $20 box of ammo. Okay, so I spent $30. That $10, that could be a meal or a full dinner for some people. Like that money is accounted for. So it's bad legislation all over the place. And then, Grant, you can think, I don't know how much control the federal government can have on slowing some ammo manufacturer, because there's plenty of ammo manufacturers are probably corporations that are conglomerates of different brands. Like you have Federal Premium, you have the Remington brand, Winchester, Browning. Like I can buy a box of 500 rounds of 22 LR, which is the small 22. Everyone knows a 22 rifle or pistol. 500 rounds for $20.
So do you think, so interesting, do you think that there is a nexus between these black Americans who are increasingly buying guns for the first time? He said these are first-time gun owners. Yep. And the potential that they might actually, I don't know, vote for Donald Trump and have the same concerns as I'm always very careful to not separate black-white, right? Because I feel like we all have the same concerns. We're all watching TV.
We're all Americans in the end of the day.
But because of what we're being told on TV, we're constantly being told by the mainstream media and then BLM as well as Antifa that, no, we must have this constant struggle and race war and what have you.
Sounds manufactured.
And I don't believe it. I'm not buying it. And now I'm getting this data point from this young person who says, look, pretty much all of my customers are first-time gun buyers, and almost all of my customers are black.
Yeah.
Because they're all saying the same thing. I'm really worried about what happens and what might happen to my community and what might happen after the election. Go.
And I've seen, we've heard, President Trump has extended out to the black community, say, why do you guys have nothing to lose? Just vote for me, give me a shot. Because a lot of the people that he's talking to are in Democrat-controlled cities that have been run for decades and run into the ground or have all these issues. Like Portland is in shambles because of it. Baltimore's in shambles because of it. And we're now seeing, former liberal, black activists and politicians becoming conservative politicians and running. Like we have Kimberly Klacik running for former Representative John Cummings' seat, which has parts of Baltimore and then Columbia, Maryland. Then I forget the gentleman's name, but he's running for, I think it's Patterson up in New Jersey, which is a heavy Democrat district. You're seeing a lot of people moving away.
There are more Republican Hispanics running as well across the country, including California.
And that's not being reported on. And I think the RNC needs to actually invest in these candidates, even though they're in really deep blue districts where it's like, should we invest money into it? It's like, well, yeah, if you want to start saying, hey, Republican parties will accept anybody. We're not what the media makes us out to be. We welcome anybody. We're all Americans. That's why we want to be unified and we have discussion of opinions. We don't have to, again, subscribe to the 100 plus tenets of being a liberal. You can be half liberal, half conservative on all these things. It doesn't. You're not to be some monolith. Everyone's a unique individual person with different thoughts and opinions. You're not going to be just thinking in one big mind collective that what we see the very progressives are trying to make us all out to be, which is insane.
And that's a great point. I really think that in the black communities in America, they are middle-class communities. I really think they are as concerned about the crazy white left progressives coming into their community as they are with BLM coming in and roughing up. And case in point, to show you how crazy all this is. In Washington, D.C., there was a protest recently, and it reflects a common theme in American cities. It was all white, you can clearly tell, rich kids in Washington, D.C. And what they were doing is they were protesting through the street and they were harassing people at outdoor cafes. Now, we've seen this, of course, in the mainstream media, but what we haven't seen is anything like what we're going to show you in this clip coming up, where it's all, not a single African American in this group. It's fascinating. All white kids saying, get out of the cafes and come into the street. It's like, dude, I'm having dinner with my wife, you know? I mean, just go but these are kids, they have no consequences. They're not kids, they're millennials for the most part, 20, 30 somethings. There are no consequences for what they're doing, but they're all white. And what are they doing? What is their objective? I wish I were there. And we're gonna play this clip for you, and then I'm also gonna tell you what that area of Washington, D.C. now looks like. So here's the clip.
We do this week. Stand up there on your own side. Kidding. Out of the bar, into the streets. 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 Out of the bar, into the streets.
So that's one of the richest areas in the United States, Washington, D.C.
Yep.
Without question. And you have all these white progressive millennials that are 20 and 30 somethings that are there in the middle of the road walking down and basically saying, get out of the bars, you're not allowed to be there, get out of the cafes, outdoor, don't hang out with your wife and your friends, come into the streets. And what I was telling you right before we heard that clip is entire block after block after blocks in Washington, D.C., so block after block, are boarded up.
Yeah.
On the first floor. Boarded up.
Yep.
Boarded up in one of the richest cities in the world.
And one of the most secure cities in the world. All the federal security forces you have there, and not to mention the Metropolitan Police, and in all the other outlying jurisdictions, there is a huge law enforcement presence there. With all the cameras too? Come on.
Yeah, cameras, and you're right about that. There are so many layers of law enforcement in the greater Washington area. And of course, you have a mayor who doesn't care. She's obviously, I'm wondering if these people even have permits. You're supposed to have a permit in order to protest.
Yeah.
I gotta wonder if she's even granting them. I have to think that at some point they have to stop granting some of these because they have to have concerns about what might happen. But entire blocks of the city are boarded up. Restaurants boarded up, restaurants that were part of hotels on the first floor, boarded up. Stores boarded up. I mean, have you seen this?
I've not seen it in D.C., but what this clip reminds me of is way back when, early on when the protests started happening and the turning riots, was where a group of black women were confronting two white women. The white women were spray painting I think it was a Starbucks or something, and just kind of defacing or destroying it. And they're like, and the black women were like, "What are you doing here? You don't even live here. Why are you destroying all our shops and our stores that we go to in our neighborhood that we're not destroying? We're protesting for a just cause, and you're just thinking, you're helping us by defacing a Starbucks? Get out of here." And granted, I don't know the exact quote, and I mentioned in the last podcast where basically according to what I've heard, is Malcolm X quotes beware the white liberal, the helping people, because they're not, it doesn't seem, they're exasperating issues, they're distorting the message when it came from a pure place to fix something, and now it's being this weird amalgamation of a monster. It's a Leviathan that we're trying to defeat, that they're just feeding.
Oh yes, we're talking about George Floyd, what happened to George Floyd, and now we're talking about, well, let's not have some sort of conversation about reforms on when you arrest someone and how you arrest them, but instead, let's walk down the street and tell people you can't be at outdoor cafes who have nothing to do with any of this stuff.
Exactly.
Just minding their own business.
And living their lives, because I don't know when DC allowed open, being able to go to restaurants and eat out in open air. If you're being cooped up in DC for a long time, you want to take the chance to go to a restaurant and enjoy it, because going to restaurants is a fun experience. You get to meet people, you get to actually have some normalcy again, which we haven't really had. Thankfully, with Maryland, I've been able to go to some restaurants and be socially distanced and enjoy it. And if someone interrupted my dinner, I'll be like, well, sorry?
And you know what's interesting is I always ask myself, and I'm going to ask you, Ryan, what would you do if you're sitting out there at the outdoor cafe with a date, and it's you and this girl, and you're there, and you're having dinner, and they come up with this bullhorn, and they're yelling right in your face, out of the bar and into the streets. And what would you do at that particular point in time? What would you do?
I would look at him kind of dumbfounded. I'd be like, also, like, I guess they don't care about social distancing because I don't know where you've been. You're now infecting my social bubble. Now I have to potentially go get quarantined for 2 weeks to make sure I didn't get COVID. That just ruins my life.
So I always wonder,
I would walk away though, to be honest, or get a restaurant.
I feel like I would want to buy, if I'm going to go downtown to any city at this point, I feel like I need to have like a lot of pepper spray that shoots 20 yards away from me so the person can just stay away. But here's the thing. Do you know that pepper spray is illegal in Washington, D.C.? You can't even spray it in Washington, D.C. As a civilian, which of course is stupid because if you ever needed pepper spray, now's the time you need it when you're going into a city. Let's say you have an appointment.
Yeah.
Right? Because, people are at 25%, depending on the city. Some are 50%, some are more. And you have an appointment, you're going to meet someone. Maybe you're meeting them for lunch in an outdoor cafe. I at this point in time, I would bring that. And then if I used it against these idiots who were attacking me while I'm sitting out at an outdoor cafe, I'm the one that would get arrested instead of them.
I just want civility back and then common sense to get back in the psyche of the American people because, granted, I think the majority of the American people have exercised common sense, but I just think a very vocal minority is getting way too much attention from the media and it's making them seem bigger than they are. But then again, they are making themselves known and I just want to move on from this chapter.
I couldn't agree more. So next up, The Tiger King. Have you seen The Tiger King on Netflix?
Reluctantly, yes.
Okay. How about you, Chris?
I'm not.
Okay, Chris has not seen it. So I have seen The Tiger King. That's, of
Save
course,
yourself.
That's what you watch when you're super bored during the pandemic, of course, when you couldn't go anywhere, when there was a complete and utter lockdown. So I feel like that's when everybody was watching it, and I think that's pretty much the case.
Yep.
So The Tiger King has Carol Baskin versus Joe Exotic. And Carol Baskin is this woman who, you explain it.
She's Big Cat Rescue, I think based in Florida, where, she has a large big cat tiger population where she does, granted, apparently there is more tigers in the United States in domestic captivity than out in the wild anywhere else in the world, which is pretty shocking to hear. And also almost think puppy mills for tigers basically in the which I'm like, what? Okay.
Right, that's a good analogy.
And of course, Joe Exotic was a very eclectic owner of one of these tiger zoos, and Carol, of course, perfect enemy for him.
His was for profit, and hers was not for profit.
And for rescuing cats, where she doesn't think that big cats in general should be held in captivity or used for profit, and these zoos. But basically, I would say she would rescue cats and then have them herself, and then have people come visit those cats
and donate money. So she was making money in her nonprofit. Yeah. He was making money in his for-profit, but they were both doing fundamentally the same thing.
All the people involved that own all these places. There was a guy I think in Georgia that he had a harem of women around him. They started as interns and they were full employees and whatever. These people are all crazy for sure. Well, crazy.
They are crazy. I agree.
Whatever their business is, but there's crazy individuals on themselves, and we're gonna get into more Carol Baskin. But
because they pet these wild animals like they're dogs, and at the end of the day, the wild animal in one stroke could kill you. Just one crazy change.
If I want to see a big cat, I'm going to a zoo where it's actual experts that trained years and years and years, went to college for animal zoology, and they're trying to help rejuvenate these endangered species or vulnerable species. Now I don't know where tigers are listed or whatever specific tigers are listed on the endangered, almost extinct stuff, but these for-profit zoos out in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. I'm like, okay, how is this legal?
True. And I thought it was amazing. Like Joe Exotic, he had these huge cages that he had built to put the tigers in, and of course, had lots of different cages.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, she was a rescuer, and her cages were really small,
dilapidated,
and I'm thinking, well, how is this fair? But she apparently was considered the saint, except for the fact that when they started looking into her past, they found out that she was married
originally,
to this guy named Don Lewis, and Don Lewis was a very wealthy businessman. And one day, Don Lewis just disappeared. In fact, Don Lewis was the one that introduced her to tigers. And So she got really into it while she was married to Don, and Don was very quiet and very apparently secretive about his business interests as well as his wealth, and very frugal. And apparently she may or may not have liked that according to the family of Don Lewis. Well, guess what? Don Lewis one day just disappears.
Yep.
And to this day, no one has found him. And what are some of the things they thought happened?
You know, the one of the story that got pushed, I think, by Carol was like, oh yeah, he disappeared somewhere. Like he may have took a private plane and crashed it somewhere.
Went to Central America or went to...
Yeah. And then I forget someone like I forget in the documentary of Tiger King on Netflix. Either she made the comment or someone else made the comment where apparently a tiger's digestive system is so like powerful that anything that comes out of the tiger you can't even tell what it was.
What it once was.
They're like so a human could be totally digested. So there was a theory. And the way she kind of presented herself and talked about her husband, and I think that tiger had digestion theory, she kind of left the door open that she may have done it. It's like no one knows, and it's like so the county sheriff reopened the investigation I think a month ago into it, and it's just crazy.
It is, and what's fascinating about her is
and she's remarried too.
This guy Don Lewis that she was married to, her first husband who disappeared, he really loved his businesses, and without question, he also loved his wealth. And so one of her arguments, one of the things Carol Baskin said is, well, maybe he just went down, he loved Central America, maybe he went there and stayed there. It's like, yeah, but he left his money behind, and you're the one with all the money.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to believe that he would do that, because if he wanted to get divorced from you, he would have done it. In fact, even Don Lewis's 3 daughters have actually said the same thing. So, funny enough, Carol Baskin, she is now going to be on Dancing with the Stars.
I heard about this.
Dancing with the Stars. I kid you not, podcast listeners. Carol
Good
Baskin.
reality TV.
I mean, she's not she's pretty darn unattractive. And but the thing is, she has this. She is infamous because of this documentary, and because she is considered to be this evil person who ultimately put away Joe Exotic, but also put Joe Exotic types out of business across the country because she's virtuous, because hers is not for profit.
Well, Joe Exotic got arrested for potential murder for hire.
For good reason. Yeah, for good reason, because he's certifiable. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But so here we have a clip. So we're gonna set this up. This clip that you're gonna listen to is Don Lewis. It's his 3 daughters. Don Lewis was married to Carol Baskin. He's the guy that disappeared, that people think Carol killed, and then because she killed him for his money, because he was going to leave her, and I'm sure there was a prenup, but apparently the prenup disappeared, and that's what they said into the documentary. It's like one day there was a prenup, and the next day there wasn't, and Don disappeared, and the prenup had been modified right before he disappeared, which is why they think Carol Baskin killed him. Well, Don Lewis's daughters have always thought that Carol killed him. And so what they're going to do is, and what they have done, is they produced a commercial that they're going to air during Dancing with the Stars, where Don Lewis's 3 daughters and attorney and Don Lewis's personal secretary are going to run an ad to basically attacking her.
She's probably unfazed. Carol Baskin's probably so unfazed by it and probably spinning a yarn. She should be a politician.
Oh, she's disgusting. She really is. So we have this clip, and here it is.
I'm Gail, one of Don Lewis's daughters. We are a real family, and to us, he was Daddy.
I'm Linda, one of Don Lewis's daughters, and we miss our dad.
I'm Donna. I'm Don Lewis's oldest daughter. We need to know what happened to our father.
I'm Ann, Don's former assistant. All we're asking is justice for Don.
Don Lewis mysteriously disappeared in 1997. His family deserves answers. They deserve justice. Do you know who did this or if Carol Baskin was involved?
A $100,000 reward has been funded. You can call the tip line at 646-450-6530.
Or call our office at 800-LITIGATE. Thank you.
So that was the commercial from Don Lewis's 3 daughters from his previous marriage, as well as his personal secretary and their attorney, who basically are running this ad during the Dancing with the Stars airing.
Yep.
Accusing her of murdering their father.
Pretty much.
And the thing is, it's universal. So you gotta wonder, you got to really wonder if there's a lot of truth to this, because I've thought after you watch the documentary, don't you believe that she did it?
It definitely gave me the vibe. I'm like, ooh. And also, you can clearly see this woman's a little off.
Oh, she looks psychopathic.
Her
Like
eyes
she's a
scare me.
psychopath that she would clearly do anything for the money, and she's clearly doing the Tigers for the fame. You know, she's taking care of them for the fame and the money, I think.
Yeah.
Without question. So we also have a clip from Carol Baskin talking about the song that she's going to dance to, the very first song on Dancing with the Stars. So here's Carol Baskin
can't
that
make this
everybody
up.
hates, and everybody thinks she's a murderer, including me, by the way, including Don Lewis's 3 children and Don Lewis's personal secretary. Well, we have a clip from Carol Baskin talking about her stint that's upcoming on Dancing with the Stars, and here it is.
Perfect.
The Eye of the Tiger is the perfect song for our opening dance because the phrase Eye of the Tiger means to be focused and to be confident. And I am confidently focusing on that mirror ball.
The Tiger, the biggest hit song of 1982 by hard rock band Survivor.
So there you go. So my suggestion, of course, in Dancing with the Stars, you have a guy who's a professional dancer dancing with the guest, who would be Carol Baskin, and they train the guest, and they compete with
Make sure the dancer does not disappear all of a sudden.
So that's good. So what I was going to suggest, Ryan, is that I was going to suggest that the guy who's the professional dancer dress up as Don Lewis, her first husband.
Or no, you should dress up as Joe Exotic.
Oh my God! I bet, you know what? I bet they do that.
Get the mullet going.
Joe Exotic with chains on or something like that. You know?
That's...
Or Joe Exotic with a shotgun, or pistol, which he's famous for carrying.
Totally unrelated point, but the reporter called Survivor a hard rock band. I find that very hard to believe.
No, it's probably not. And we have Chris, who's an expert on this. Our assistant producer, and he's shaking his head. He's like, nah, it's not. It's not a hard rock band.
Especially in the 80s. Come on, you probably had a bunch of bands. Like, you could say, maybe, I don't know, Black Sabbath was more heavy metal, but I would call that hard rock now.
But good for you, Dancing with the Stars, for really getting somebody on who's going to create a lot of buzz.
Great TV.
It's great TV. It'll make for great TV, and this ad that's being placed at the same time makes it even greater.
How far do you think she's going to get? Do you think,
not far at all.
Yeah.
People hate her. She's going to be the first to be voted off. They hate her. There's no doubt in my mind. So next up, we have Elon Musk. He talks about green nickel. So nickel is, of course, used in the construction of batteries for electric cars, correct?
Rare earth minerals, yep.
Yep, as well as lithium. And when you mine nickel for Tesla batteries, for example, Tesla cars, it's extremely anti-environment, if you will. It's really great.
Most excavating of rare earth minerals like lithium and copper and nickel, and so, it's not that great for the environment.
It's very, very bad for the environment. What's fascinating is Teslas are supposed to be good for the environment.
Well, yeah, but then what do you do with when a battery's shot? It's toxic. Your batteries are, I think, mixed with metal and acid, and there's obviously chemical reactions that change the components over time. So where can you put that stuff?
That's exactly right.
Maybe use Yucca Mountain.
And so, do you know who has one of the world's largest reserves of nickel? Indonesia.
Oh.
So Indonesia,
I was going to say China.
Indonesia, the archipelago of islands in the land of beautiful rainforests, right? You know that these are individuals that could really care less about the environment.
No, it's money.
And it is. It's just money, no matter what happens to the environment, no matter how irreversible it is. And so Elon Musk, I suppose, to his credit, is saying, well, you know what we need is green nickel. In other words, nickel that is mined in a way that is environmentally sensitive. But the problem is, can that really be done? And honestly, I don't know what the answer to the question is. But the fact that he even brings it up demonstrates to you that it's a problem.
Well, I'm glad I think he's an American citizen now, but I'm glad he is because he's actually, embodying one of our American values is always to be optimistic and always innovate to rise to meet a challenge. So I don't know how you're going to mine green nickel or make the mining process green because you're excavating. There's many different ways to do it. You have mountain topping where you literally cut off the top of the mountain and just drill right down, or like you're going, especially Indonesia, it's all, as you said, lush rainforest with a lot of very sensitive biodiversity, which you need to maintain because we don't need more species going extinct on this planet. Okay, but how
I agree with you.
How are you gonna do it? Like you're gonna go maybe make a mine shaft underneath, like far enough away where it's just slowly going down, and then but you're still disturbing dirt. You're still disturbing you have to be. It's expensive to be green. It's really expensive to be green because it costs more time, more money, more supplies, everything.
And doesn't it make you wonder, is a Tesla really green then? Because you have to mine the lithium for the battery, you have to mine the nickel, and apparently the mining of nickel is particularly destructive to the environment, and then lithium is as well because you have to, it's like strip mining.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea that once all of that is done, you somehow have a product and a car that is virtuous as compared to its competitors that use combustible engines, you gotta wonder.
Because you're still, in a sense, maybe, yes, when you're driving your car, you're not exposing emissions per se, but then when you plug in your Tesla, you're getting electricity. They follow the energy supply chain. You plug your Tesla into an outlet. Where is that energy coming? Is it coming from a solar panel? Oh, great. Then there you go. Your carbon footprint's reduced. But what if that energy coming from a oil power plant, a coal power plant? Hell, you can say nuclear too, or wind. But then you have these trade-offs. So I guess it's more or less a calculation of how much less you use in the Tesla in the whole energy consumption and CO2 footprint, then you feel better, or you're just doing.
Well, how much is your CO2 footprint to do mining of lithium and mining of nickel? That's just one part of building, the Tesla battery. So
well, exactly. Well, then you think about excavating the material. Now you have this raw material. Now, how are you going to refine that material where it fits into a battery manufacturing process? That probably involves using water. That water becomes, I don't know necessarily the product, but I just know sometimes when you use water, that water is now totally polluted and you can't clean it. So now it's known as hard water. So where are you going to store the hard water? And that also, water is a very a resource we got to watch out for because we depend on it as humans. Everything depends on water to survive and thrive on this planet. So you're getting to the whole thing of how the global ecosystem, everything is connected. There's trade-offs, there's pros and cons of things. You got to make sure that your impact is minimal or you can recover from it and not make it irreversible. But
it's just fascinating that it's only now that some of the news outlets are finally beginning to discuss this because Musk is saying the demand for nickel is going to go way up because of the demand for electric cars.
Well, everything, starting from our cell phone use. This all takes stuff.
And so, but in particular, obviously cars. And so
the batteries are huge.
He's taped about this because he says, please get nickel because we need it, but it has to be quote unquote green nickel, which tells you, when you podcast listeners, it tells you this is an issue. It's an issue. And we got to really think about this critically as, is this really a green car? So anyway, we have a clip on this, and here is Elon Musk.
If Tesla will give you a giant contract for a long period of time, if you mine nickel efficiently and in an environmentally sensitive way. So hopefully this message goes out to all mining companies. Please get nickel.
So you hear him laughing? He's literally laughing at
Sounds
this.
like in jest.
An environmental way. So when you mine it, so please get nickel. I mean, look, the guy, he's no doubt, this is a brilliant guy. Okay, so we're not going there. We're going with this is we need to start asking questions about why we would ever have subsidized this to begin with and why it's still being subsidized, because I don't think it should be subsidized unless we really measure, as you said, Ryan, already, the supply chain CO2 footprint and damage to the environment.
Yep.
Any thoughts on this?
I think it almost sounds like he was making a comment in jest, but on top of that, it's like, he's a businessman and he realizes that he requires some of these rare earth minerals such as nickel, and he's probably forecasting there's going to be a shortage of this nickel, and he's like, well, I need to gin up some like demand or some like saying, hey, there's going to be a lot of demand, so people are going to be more inclined to say, all right, we're going to invest in mining nickel.
Interesting. So next up, Governor Gavin Newsom signs a bill reducing penalties for sex with willing same-sex minors. We're going to talk about this again. We did talk about this last podcast, and the reason we're going to talk about this again is because in case if you missed our last podcast, you got to listen to this. So Governor Gavin Newsom actually signed the bill in California just in the last couple of weeks, which reduces penalties for sex with willing same-sex minors. In other words, an adult finds a willing same-sex minor, and that would be considered legal in California.
Starting from 14 up, and then they're within
17.
Within the age range of 10 years older too. So that's 24, 14 and 24-year-old. That's
so what
crazy.
you're saying is a 14-year-old
can
boy
consent.
Or girl
Yep.
could have sex
With
if they
same
gave
sex.
consent
Yep.
to a 24-year-old man, and
Or
likewise,
girl. Yeah.
girl could also as well. And we have to ask ourselves the question,
Is that right?
who in their right mind would put such a bill in, and who in their right mind would vote for it and or sign it? What governor would sign this bill? And it shows you the slow creep of the crazies getting in charge of our electoral process, and the fact that people just look the other way and say, oh well, that's fine, I'm not really going to care, but then they keep voting for these idiots. And I gotta wonder what's happening. So here's what it says. It says California lawmakers passed a bill that reduces penalties for adults who have oral or anal sex with a willing minor child if the sex offender is within 10 years of the age of the victim. So as you said, Ryan, a 14-year-old, 24, 15, 25, 16, 26, and then 17, 27. At 18, you're considered an adult. The California State Legislature passed SB 145, and now Governor Newsom has just signed the bill. It would lower the penalties for adults who have sex with same-sex minors, and in such case, the judge could decide if the adult has to even register as a sex offender, with the proviso that that sex offender would have to be within 10 years of age of the victim. In other words, you could get away with it.
In I think the last podcast you made the comment that this was the representative or whatever put this bill forward to make it an even playing field because there's a law already on the books for if it was between a straight couple that's 10 years a difference of age from 14 or whatever. So he's just saying the reason why I'm putting this bill in is because to make it equal for same sex and straight. And it's like, okay, but still it's kind of, why did we make this a law?
Why would we have it at all?
Yeah, exactly.
No matter if it's same sex or straight.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have it at all.
Yeah.
That's why we call them children.
Yep.
And a 14-year-old is incapable of making such a decision with a 24-year-old.
Which is
I'm sorry, they're just not. And a 15-year-old and so forth.
And
that's why they're children.
Why is a 24 if a 24-year-old wants to engage in this kind of activity with a 14-year-old, that makes me very concerned for just everything involved because that should just make you just repulsed.
It should. And so the sponsor of the bill, State Senator Scott Wiener, very appropriately named, Democrat from San Francisco, talks about this. And when you just look at him, you can tell the guy has a complete and utter mental illness because of all the things we could be concentrating on as a society. Certainly, what they could be concentrating on in the state of California and San Francisco, Scott Wiener decides to focus on this. And so we have a clip from Scott Wiener. You make up your own mind what you think about him. Here is the clip.
The age range that we're talking about here is 14 to 17-year-olds with someone who is up to 10 years older. This bill has no application to anyone under the age of 14. And that age range is an existing category in the law. It has existed for almost 100 years, 14 to 17-year-old having sex with someone up to 10 years older.
Yeah, so This guy, you can tell he's Senator Scott Wiener from San Francisco, is really excited about this, you can tell. And this was SB 145, which is now law in California, so that children can have sex with adults, same-sex adults with adults, and there's no consequence for the adult. Yeah. Any final thoughts on this, Ryan?
I don't know why this is even a topic.
It's unbelievable. Well, what do you mean is why it's a topic, why somebody would even
bring it up as a bill,
a priority in any kind of legislature.
When we have so many more pressing problems going on in our country right now.
Yeah, if anything, we should be protecting children more. And isn't it interesting, the Democrat Party, which says how concerned they are about human trafficking in California, is now legalizing human trafficking.
Because sex trafficking has been getting a lot more attention in recent years, and it's growing more and more because apparently it's becoming more prevalent, which honestly means...
Primarily from illegal immigrants who are being trafficked into the United States.
Which, not gonna lie, me being naive and not read up on it, I was actually shocked when there was more reports about an increase in sex trafficking occurring in the United States, which I'm like, wait, what?
And Scott Wiener can't wait for more. Shame on you, Scott Wiener. Next up, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up for the dumbest bill in America, Mr. Assistant Producer? Of course. Here it is. And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is from Nevada. Endless voting in Nevada.
Ooh.
You heard that correctly. Endless voting in Nevada. There's a Nevada bill that allows ballots to be counted even if they arrive up to 3 days late. So the ballot can arrive 3 days after the election and still be counted. Oh, but wait, there's more with this bill. The Trump campaign challenges the Nevada mail-in vote law, which was, by the way, passed within 100 days of the election. In other words, completely changing the way voting occurs in a state, changing the rules of the game right before the election. And the re-election campaign of President Trump has narrowed its focus in a lawsuit challenging a new Nevada law expanding mail-in voting for the November election. In other words, mail-in voting for everybody. The Trump campaign is now specifically targeting a provision of the law, which is known as AB4, which allows ballots received up to 3 days after the election to be counted, even if the postmark isn't clear. Yeah.
What happened to, I think, aren't we supposed to ensure we have fair and timely elections where we're not waiting with bated breath who won after the general election date?
Yeah, so what you will hear, we have a couple of clips from Nevada. First, we have the Senate leader, who is a Democrat. Her name is Nicole Cannizzaro. So Nicole Cannizzaro, the Democrat leader of the state Senate in Nevada, talks about this as just not a big deal because what we're trying to do is make it safe so that everybody can just mail in a ballot. So we're expanding access to the ballot. But she doesn't really talk about AB4's other provision, which is if there's no postmark on the ballot, as long as it's received 3 days after the election, well, then it'll be counted. By the way, for you podcast listeners out there, we pretty much know the day of the election who wins, okay? So what you can do then is fill out a bunch of ballots, have them all ready, and make sure that if your candidate is not winning or is close, you can make sure you just have them arrive, I don't know, without postmarks. So here's Nicole Cannizzaro, Democrat Senate leader from the state of Nevada, talking about AB4. Here it is.
Process for mail-in voting for all active voters in the state of Nevada, and has provisions for making sure that those ballots make it out to voters and ensuring a fair and easy process for voters to return those ballots. It also includes, and I think this is an important piece to recognize and also to highlight, it still allows for in-person voting for those folks who would like to cast their ballot in person at an election day voting site
What a compromise.
or during early voting.
If you won the lottery, Are you going to mail in your winning lottery ticket, or are you going to come down and present it in person? You're going to take that lottery ticket down and present it in person because you know for a fact that it is being presented the right way. Same thing with the most sacred thing we have in America.
So that was that both clips, or was that just one clip? That was just one clip. Okay, just making sure. So the second person that was talking was Michael McDonald. He's the chair of the Nevada Republican Party, and you heard what he said. He's like, yeah, if you win the lottery and you got a lottery ticket, by the way, everybody see themselves one day as winning the lottery. You got that lottery ticket. Are you going to mail it in?
No, and also I think by law you have to be in person to claim your winnings because you need to verify your identity and verify that the ticket's real.
Isn't that funny that the state wants to make sure that it's real and that they want you to verify you are who you are, but not when it comes to voting? It's just fascinating. And Michael McDonald did a good job on that. That was a good analogy. And of course, the first person you heard talk was Nicole Cannizzaro, the Democrat Senate leader, who didn't even talk about the fact that a postmark isn't, if it's not clear, which means, by the way, there doesn't have to be one. Because that's the whole point of putting this information into the law. You say, well, if the postmark can't really be read, then as long as it arrives, it's still going to be counted.
How about this instead? People get ballots mailed to them. Here's an idea. You get your ballots mailed to you, then you have to deliver your ballot in person to a designated drop-off center where you get checked in or verified. If you return your ballot, so then you're marked off, saying their ballot's in, then there you go. Then it can remove the idea of any oh wait, we got found like 500 ballots that were 3 days late. Where do they come from? There's no accountability.
Exactly. And so we also have a clip from Michael McDonald, another clip with him. He's the chair of the Republican Party talking about this issue, and here's the clip.
I think there are sufficient safeguards in this bill that allow for safe and secure elections come November, and that is something that I proudly cast my ballot for today.
I wouldn't feel confident in anything right now because if you look at it, I couldn't imagine Joe Biden wants to win a rigged election like this. Who changes the laws 100 days out?
So that's, of course, Nicole Cannizzaro again and Michael McDonald, chair. Messed that up, that little clip, but nonetheless, it's the clip that we wanted. And they're talking about, of course, the election and what's going to happen with AB4. Look, who in their right mind would change the rules of the game 100 days from the game when you've been planning your strategy for the game of the election for years, and then suddenly, right before they change the name, they change the whole game. And so endless voting in Nevada, it's a thing. It's quite real.
I find it funny because, again, if the shoe was on the left foot, imagine if Republicans were pushing this, there would be holy hell raised across all media, all the Democrats in major leadership positions. It would be saying they're trying to steal the election, blah, 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 all that stuff. But now, the Democrats are the one pushing this. It's kind of like, well, I don't find it equal, if that makes sense. It's just... We haven't invested, and then you can use the argument, it's unprecedented times because we're in a pandemic. We want to make sure everyone's safe, be able to still vote during this time where they don't have to be in person. But it's I think we're on the decline, especially in some states, so that where in-person voting should be held. And also, again, more times than not, we talked about this before. There's early voting days that you can be less people, and then I think we're pretty good.
And voter ID, for God's sakes, voter ID.
And I think we're pretty good with the social distancing. You have to come in with a mask. You have to, social distance. The line might be longer. The wait times, there might be less machines, your election boards need to find other voting locations that have more room to have more machines that are within the social distance guidelines. Simple stuff like that. I'd rather put more of our taxpayer money into that rather than trying to figure out where all these ballots go when they get mailed to, and then when people return it, the real people designed for those ballots actually vote for the person they want to vote for.
And if you think that's been in Nevada, in Arizona, the High Court rebuffs online signatures for ballot measures. The Supreme Court in Arizona ruled this month that ballot measure petitions must be signed with a pen and paper. Oh, of course, you think? Makes sense. 4 ballot measure campaigns had filed suit earlier in the year seeking the authority to collect voter signatures online instead of course, making sure there was actually a signature with a pen because of the pandemic. Once again, there's constantly gaming the electoral system, which is just ridiculous. So there you have it. Endless voting in Nevada. Final thoughts on endless voting in Nevada. Do millennials even care?
well, if you want Joe Biden to win, they don't care. They say that's good. We're allowing people to vote. Blah blah blah. When as like you're kind of concerned about what may happen, like especially with both presidential nominees using very inflammatory rhetoric, saying he's going to get removed from the White House if he loses by the military because he won't give up power, or it's like we can't trust elections. We got to take it to the Supreme Court. It's just a lot of stuff where and
they're creating these problems.
They're creating the doubt in the integrity of the general election, which I don't think we really
state by state.
I don't think we really had that in recent memory, to be honest.
I don't ever remember this happening with laws changing in states this close to the election that create complete uncertainty and doubt, no matter what the outcome is.
Which is not great.
It's not. And that's the last thought on Word on Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to Ryan the Squirrel Brady. And of course, our producer, Adam Katura, and our assistant producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and our website. See you next time.